Juliana, it's such a pleasure to come across people that, and we've got a lot of similar journey, if you will, in the sense of education, background, focus, etc. And it's so great to come across people that are on the same path.
I feel the same way. I'm excited to be able to talk with you today.
And let's jump right in. You seem to have when I'm learning about you, the one word that keeps jumping out is the idea of agency and the importance of it. And so, to start the conversation today, let's just define it. How do you define it in the sense so that way everybody's got the same language surrounding this?
So I found that it's really been tricky. I mean, it's taken me 20 years to really come up with what feels right for me. And the reason why is because it's several things. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's a concept, and it's a skill. So I've been working on defining it through those 4 different slots as well. And as a noun, it's a person's ability to be able to predict and to understand that there is a decision to be made. Like, it's kind of the self-determination that we need to have. It's also your ability to see what outcomes there are likely to come to bear. And third is to respond and react to what actually does happen after you make a decision or you have a choice, so that you can learn or let go.
Okay. And so, I mean, that's what's interesting. So 20 years to help kind of capture what this idea means. I totally understand it, because it is one of those things that I guess is probably not, unfortunately, as common in the vernacular and the field as needs to be.
Yes.
And then also just out among the world is the idea of what does agency even mean? So what is it what would make that such an issue that where it's not just part of the everyday, oh, this is something that's so important. And my parents taught me this even.
Yes. Well, and that's something too that it began with me really being curious about how people make choices and how they make decisions in their life. And when I started asking people about this, when I realized that all of a sudden they couldn't form a sentence, or they're like, I don't really know. You just make a decision. I just go with my gut, or they had these answers, but nothing was really uniform. And I did think, why aren't we being taught this? And for those of us who are lucky enough to be around people who are making decisions and are showing you how they go about this, I realized, oh, this is a skill. And so in the skill, I actually came up with 5 steps of how to make a decision and how to then have agency in that decision-making process. And what I've discovered is that people who were coming to me as a therapist, most often, what I consider the 4th part of the skill of decision-making, which is when consequences intended and unintended come to bear. And that, another way I would say it is like, if you're in a boxing ring, it's the swing you didn't see coming that takes you to the mat. Okay. And I wanted to help people to have more agility, to be able to juke to things, to be able to feel okay. And the concept of the tolerance for ambiguity came into bear also during this. And I remember thinking, when I first saw this coming up in all my truly thousands of interviews that I had in my research, I was like, no, this is not what I want to happen. I work, even my own life, work so hard at creating certainty that equals safety in my life. Like, this
Don't
is
we
it.
all?
Like, yes, we can plan it. We can foresee things. And when it became very clear that the people who were at most peace and grounded in general in their life, but particularly in decision-making, and then even more so at the end of decision-making, were the ones who had a tolerance for ambiguity. And they felt safest because they knew no matter how things happened, they were going to be okay. And I thought, wow, when you meet somebody, some people describe it as comfortable in their own skin. Some people describe it as somebody who's very grounded. But it's somebody who understands that life is going to swirl, life is going to be unpredictable, and they have themselves. And so that's another way to describe agency is standing up and showing up for yourself. But then I kind of progressed to something else too. And I don't know if you want to speak about that before I go on to another point.
Let's go. I mean, going, this is an agency conversation, so it should go wherever it goes if we're just going to model it accurately too.
I literally just finished doing a TED Talk about this weekend. So I'm joking that I'm about to give you my TED Talk with it as well. But another thing that really became important when you're asking about why should we be doing this? Why should we be looking at agency in our lives? and employing it is that there's a lot, you'll hear agency a lot more now. Some of it is confusing. It's like a PR agency or government agency. And obviously, I'm not speaking of that, but you'll hear it used synonymously with boundaries or empowerment.
Right.
And I want to be clear, my view and my research in agency is that there's really an important difference. That boundaries are a step along the way towards agency, and empowerment is after boundaries. But that there's a difference between empowerment and agency that's crucial, and it's this. Empowerment is individual, and that's wonderful. You know you have a voice, it matters, but it ends in its efficacy and in its ability to help you in relationships, because agency is relational. Agency requires you to show up for yourself, but to consider the ripple effects and multiple perspectives of others. Empowerment does not. And at some point, your empowerment is going to bump up against somebody else's empowerment, whether it's in your marriage, or a company or a government. And then you need to figure out how to be relational in that conflict. You need to be understanding of how to negotiate your agency next to somebody else's agency.
Right. No, and I think that's an incredibly powerful distinction, because we're talking about what comes to my mind, Juliana, is this idea of individuation versus differentiation. To use the psychobabble terms, I live and breathe every day, because the individuation is that isolation of I am my own person, away from everybody else. But when I get into relationships that are pressuring me to conform to whatever it is that's their comfort level or anxiety relief or wishes, then how do I hang on to myself while not losing myself and the relationship? Because sometimes it's easy to be your own person when you're alone in the wilderness.
Exactly.
But it's harder to do it when you're in a whole lot of close, deep, intimate relationships.
Yes. And how do you do that and keep growing together and still feeling like so when I work with couples, we work on your individual agency, and then the couple, that relationship has its own agency. You get to co-create what you want your relationship to look like and be like. And I don't know if our society really supports a lot of that. And I know it certainly doesn't speak about it in those terms.
Well,
and I
Hollywood and Hallmark don't speak about that.
No.
It's the illusion romanticized. We are of one brain and mind and emotion all the way through, which no, that's not the truth. So
that's right. Right. And so we do a lot of teaching. I know you do this in your work too. A lot of teaching of relearning then how do you relate to others without losing yourself in the process.
That's perfect. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, Juliana, to the idea of the 5 things that you speak of. I think it's probably important because the one thing I want listeners to get out of this, if we're talking about trying to be more passionately alive in life and in marriage and just parenting, and I mean it fits to everything, right? Of the best gift I can give to anybody I care about is a better version of me, an improving, powerful version of me, if you will, and then adding to it the component of in relationship too, not just in isolation. So what would be the concepts that are worth everybody unpacking and understanding as they're on this journey to applying this better in their own life?
Yes. So the steps of agency, I think, are really critical too, because when you start doing the skill of agency, you realize that it helps you get to know yourself. And as you get to know yourself, you get to have better agency that's more fine-tuned, and everyone gets to then see the more authentic you, including yourself, and your relationships become richer. So let's start with the 5 steps. The first step is that there's a decision to be made. When I was doing my research, again, it sounded so obvious, and I'll say this too, it's going to, again, sound really insultingly simple. Like, wow, it took you 20 years to come up with this.
Well, some people might think that I am absolutely not going to think that, just because we realize
I did. There were a few times I did.
Fair enough. But I think it's this idea, we have this belief now with Passionately Married that the concepts and the ideas we teach are relatively simple, but incredibly difficult to actually do.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. And the more you start looking at agency and unpacking your past decisions And experiences, you'll see it. And as you start employing it in your present and future, you'll see that it's a lot more complicated. So I know you get it. So the first thing is, there's a decision to be made. And when I was talking to so many people, and at first my research began within the topic of sexuality, and then I started expanding it outside of into different contexts. But I kept hearing over and over again, it just happened to me. And not speaking about sexual assault or not speaking about any kind of violence, but just like kind of before I knew it, there I was, and I didn't even notice that there was a point that I could have made a decision. Or there's multiple decisions, and you quote, pick the wrong one, or you focus on one that seems more evident, but actually the bigger decision was behind it and you avoided it instead of actively hitting it on. So you have to know there's a decision to be made. The second is that you feel confident that you're the right person to make that decision, that you can make a decision that's aligned with your purpose and intention, and that this is the right time and place to make it. And if you're over the age of 4, you have experienced agency or the lack thereof, and you have experienced what it's like to make a decision and have it not go well. So when you've had that experience, and if you add any years of beyond that, as we start having this loss of confidence whenever you've experienced, when you feel like you've made a good decision.
Yeah.
And it's got bad things happening to good people, or you think you've really had lots of forethought, that starts shaking your confidence in yourself. So again, like when you hear you have to feel confident that you can make a good decision, that's part of this, is not letting, when things have been unattended and other decisions, shake the belief that you're the right one to be in the driver's seat of your decisions and in your life. So it's a skill to keep that sacred, and to protect it. And then third is that you make the decision, and you make it actively, and you make it in a decision that is aligned with your purpose and intention. And so you have to know who you are. You have to know what your purpose and intention is in that experience or in your life or in that relationship in order to make that active decision. This is also so you're not calling 7 people and making like decision by committee, which I'm a proponent for mentoring and for like getting people's opinion. But in the end, they can't make a decision for you. And you need to be the one that's making it. And also it's indecision is a decision too. And if there's a decision to be made, it's going to be made. And if you choose not to do it, someone else will do it, either in favor of you or not. Yeah.
Life on life terms requires something of us. And if we don't, then it still will go on.
It will. Yes, absolutely. And that doesn't feel good either. But again, sometimes what I found is when people had this thing of life happen, it feels at times, because you don't want to feel the pain of that, easier. It's not easier, but it feels like the easier path is just to let it happen. Instead of to kind of make that risk or that stand and to say, this is what I want or not, or what I don't want anymore. So it's important to be active in that. And I have found that in all of my research, it almost didn't depend how things turned out in someone's choice and decision-making, as long as they felt like they had actually made an active decision with purpose and intention. That was really the saving, healing aspect of it. So it's a crucial step of it. And then fourth, and I said this earlier, this is often where I see people in my practice, is you have to be able to live with the intended and unintended consequences of your choices.
Right.
And that's about the tolerance for ambiguity. It's about knowing you're going to be okay. It is about not trying to control everything and understanding that that's not safety.
Right.
And that's, oh gosh, that was a hard one for me in my personal life to get to that. But once I did, the release and relief that I felt and I see with my clients is truly extraordinary.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that you don't care. It's not apathy.
Right.
It is ambiguity, understanding the brilliance within that and the movement inside of it. I think of I'm a big football fan. That is when you see someone able to juke, that's the skill of ambiguity. It's being able to juke in that way. Ambiguity isn't just a passiveness. There's also an activeness as a part of it too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and on the sports metaphor, the one thing when I've heard you talk about this just a minute ago, and then now that comes to my mind is Mike Tyson's phrase of everybody has a plan until they get punched. Yes, right. And then that thing is out the window because it's like, wait, whoa. I wasn't, this hurt. Hold on. And then all of a sudden everything comes running to the surface on, and this goes back to your other steps. And I think that's probably the beauty and the sophistication of this is it now it's going back to discovering, wait, I'm okay. I did make this call. I chose to get in this ring, metaphorically speaking. And
correct.
Okay, I can do this. I can rely on a training. I can rely on a mantra. I can rely on whatever and see it as this goes through, and I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. And I will be okay, or I can have a support system that's going to make me okay. And okay doesn't mean feel good all the time either. Agency doesn't always feel good.
Good point.
But you can figure things out and be resourceful and take care of yourself and find resilience and protection, which is the fifth step. So the fifth step is you make meaning of all four of these, of the 1 through 4 steps. And this was actually kind of a later add-on in my theory of it that I realized, and it was pretty exciting when it kind of kept coming up in the data, was that agency allows you to heal in retrospect and protect you in the future. And the way that it helps you heal, and that's not, like we've heard like the terms toxic positivity and looking, at everything too positively, not, understanding that harm can happen and we need to acknowledge that. But we also look at the ability to see silver linings. We look at the ability to see like what meaning do we make of what's happened, and when you can go back to things in the past that are still causing you emotional labor or you're still having a difficult time with. Meaning making is the only thing that you have the control and power in at that point, in the terms of agency, and it's potent. So you do have the ability to go back and make different meaning of what's happened and who you are and the choices you've made, have forgiveness for yourself or for other people, or find different resources, or you've grown since the person that was in that situation. What have you learned about life? What other perspectives and skills have you garnered that you can put into that meaning making? And I found that to be quite powerful for people as well. And then just finding a balance of like, are you somebody that when something's gone awry or something went well, like, do you make absolute statements? I no longer trust such and such, or look at me, like I could do all of this. Like, are you holding staunchly to a view, or do you have, again, like some agility to it and some resiliency? So all 5 of those steps are what I found to be the skill of agency, and something that you can go to.
And I love the idea of the word skill, because I think what you're talking about here is the idea of it's something we learn, because when our emotions happen, because this is, tell me if I'm off base with what you're framing here. This is the way life goes on life terms, in the sense that I can have an idea. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna follow this path, or I'm gonna say yes to this person and see where this relationship goes, or yes to my spouse about something, and we got the best intentions and everything mapped out, and we've got it all, it's all set, and then something doesn't go according to plan. And so my immediate reaction from a feelings-based overreaction at times can be this idea of, I'm never doing that again.
Yes.
But the skill then comes in to realize, wait, that was just a reaction. That was not an edict that's determining of never again will we whatever. And
that's right.
Then I can lean back in and see it as, okay, wait, what were the nuances within all of this that life kind of determined by circumstance or not, by intention or not, that was not the right time, or we went too quick on that, or that we overshot on, I overestimated, or my expectation wasn't even realistic, or whatever it might have been.
Or I didn't have all the information. And really, when you're enacting agency in a relationship with another human being or multiple humans, it's so unpredictable.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we can only make the decision with the information that we have, and like, oh yeah, didn't see that one, or didn't know that, but yet we'll make some very concrete statements based on what we did have instead. And that to me is crucial to learn to stop doing that, or at least to lessen it.
Yeah, that's the improvement of self-talk. This is one of the things that my wife and I have been incredibly blessed by, and I don't even remember where I got this from. It was from a book years and years ago. But whenever I make a mistake or do something that didn't go according to plan, it's real easy to get self-condemning. I'm so stupid. I can't. Here we go again. I never. And it's that self-talk that's deep down, came from someplace. That's kind of what the therapeutic field is for in a lot of ways. Of, hey, let's unwind that and create a better message than whatever it was you were led to believe early on. But just changing the concept of after I do something stupid, or my wife does this too, it's like, I'm usually smarter than that. That's what I'll say to myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm usually smarter than that. And that's just kind of a framework of, yep, it happened. And yeah, that was stupid, but I'm not going to flog myself over the top and unnecessarily, but just realize, yeah, that happened, and keep it kind of as a neutral, but still have a little bit more of a positive slant.
I love that. And that falls into the fifth step, which is the meaning that you make of it, because that allows you to have room for growth, and it helps you to not be afraid of yourself or the next time in it that you're like, okay, all right, now I've learned, or I've figured something else out. But when you're self-condemning, it starts shaking those 1 through 3 quite strongly.
Well, this is so vital of a conversation, Juliana, just because I think it is one of those things that when you look across the world and across the states, man, we are reactive societies. We are non-agency communities at times, and in some regards, that's part of being in a civilized world. We do have to connect and give for the better of the whole. But I think what you're describing here is this idea of I can still have agency in my giving for the better of others, where I'm not giving in just for the sake of caving to others. I'm giving in for the betterment of all. In some regards, I think that's what makes all of us better.
Agreed. And it's so powerful when you can trust somebody's yeses just as much as you can trust their no's. And that's a skill you have to learn for yourself as well, to give that and to receive it from others, and to be a person that supports other people's agency as well. It's one thing to learn it in your own life. Again, that's like the difference between empowerment and agency. It's such a gift to give this and to have a relationship like that, whether it's a marriage or a friendship, a company, a culture.
Well, Juliana, how can people find more about you as we wrap up this segment and jump into the extended content here in just a minute? But if they want more, because I know you've got a lot of good information on this, how can they find you?
Sure. I'm on all social media handles as Dr. Juliana Hauser. And then I have a newsletter where I put just its own content in it that you can get off of my website at dr-juliana.com.
Perfect. And I'll have all that in the show notes so that if you're listening to this, everybody can easily find it. So Juliana, man, this has been fun thus far. I'm looking forward to diving in a little bit deeper here in just a second.
Thank you so much for having me.